Tag, you're it. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you. Because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It, Girl. Today, I am very excited about this guest that is next to me in these pink chairs that you can't see if you're only listening. This is my dear friend, Claire Spencer. And Claire, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. The story of how we met is such a good one. Do you want to tell it or do you want me to tell it?
I know it, so why don't you tell your version?
Okay, I'll tell the version and then you can interject. So, Claire, first of all, is the most extraordinary woman that I may have ever met in my life. Sometimes I might cry because of the comfort and just sheer joy that I feel when I am in your presence. So, and she's an extraordinary mom as well. And that's how we actually met. So this is such a I think this is a crazy story because I think it's so interesting just how people, meet serendipitously and then how we connect and navigate through life together. So I am in real estate, as you all know, and I had gotten a call on this house that I had listed on this gorgeous hillside. And I'm in the house and I'm showing it. And the couple, we start talking about children, and they are talking about their granddaughter. And I'm talking about my daughter. And it turns out they're the same age. And they show me a picture, and I show a picture of my daughter, Kennedy, and they share the school that your daughter, Maya, is going to. And they said, we're going to this thing at Little Big Minds on Saturday. It's this fun little event. You should come and meet our daughter-in-law. And I said, okay, that would be fun. And so I show up at Little Big Minds with my daughter, Kennedy, and the girls meet and we meet. And it's the moment you came up to me, you just had the brightest smile. And you had just moved here, right? You hadn't been here for very long.
We had just moved here for sure.
You moved from California. From California. And then she invited me to her daughter's birthday party. It was their was it second?
Number 2.
Second birthday party. And we became the bestest of friends and navigated through our divorces together. Navigated through divorces together. And at one time, Claire was my personal assistant, which basically included her doing all of my grocery shopping and food prepping for me, which was the most amazing thing ever as she was sort of transitioning through her divorce. Then she became the most amazing marketing manager for our team at Wendy Walker Fine Properties. And then she finally transitioned on to doing what she does now, which is, I'll let you share that. So share what you do now, because it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's so difficult to describe because it's like a funny title. I work for like a spiritual coaching and retreats company. We do coaching and we do different types of events where we bring people, like a group of people together for about 5 days and lead them through different exercises, a little bit of lectures, a little bit of adventure. We have done things as straightforward as like running a mile and doing breath work and sound baths to ecstatic dances and ice bath challenges. And I could go on about that for a long time. It's so fun. It's like grown-up camp, but instead of exploring the world, they're all opportunities for you to explore yourself. And that's what we really, encourage people to do is like look inward for answers. Look inward for, where they are in their life and what they want to be different, if they want something to be different. And in that role, it's changed so much. When I started working for this company,
What's the name of the company?
It's called Fit for Service. And I was a member the first year because I was desperate for a change. Again, I had a small child. I was divorcing or recently divorced. I was pretty unhappy. And we were, I think, at like 8 or 10 employees, and now we're at like 23 to 25. It's part of a much larger, it's one branch of business. There's also a regenerative agriculture farm. There's a media company. There's a podcast. So I would call myself the community manager of the coaching events program. And that title I hate because it sounds like, like you hire someone who's still in college to like answer Facebook comments.
This is not
what I do
at all what you do.
And that's okay.
Basically, you're like the ultimate life coach too, in my book.
Yeah. So what we talk about, we use the word medicine a lot. We do not use psychedelics in this container, but my boss is well known as a psychonaut. And the idea of the psychonaut is exploring the mind. And you can do that in many different ways. You can do that in therapy. You can do that with psychedelics. You can do that by challenging yourself with physical challenges. You can do that through meditation. But it's the idea that, we create our reality through the stories we tell and through our programming and through our patterns. And the more aware we are of those things, the more we can have a life where we're actually free to experience things. I can have, like, one of my favorite things is when I get really bogged down. My great friend Robert often says, what would this look like if it was easy, and what would it look like if it was fun? And I have taken many a hard situation and looked at all of the factors and said, it would actually look the same. I would just stop like telling such a terrible story about it. So it's really like, some things you have to do change. Like, you do have to change relationships that aren't working, that are too triggering, jobs that feel oppressive. Those require sometimes great upheaval in your life, but there are also a lot of aspects of your life where it can be fun and it can feel easy if you change the way that you decide you want to experience it.
Change the way you view it.
Yeah. And so in that role, and using this word, quote unquote, medicine, I really think that community and relating is one of the most powerful tools for self-reflection. I was at an event not so long ago with a pastor, and he was talking in this case about psychedelic medicine. And he says that one of the great pushbacks people have is this idea that psychedelics are fake because they're an altered state. And if we really think about it, fear is an altered state, anger is an altered state, love is an altered state. And what's the most likely thing in our life to put us in an altered state? It's another person. It's another person and how we are relating, what we think they're doing to us, what we think they are thinking about us, what they are actually doing to us. And so if I could help people understand one thing, it would be to really be curious about their relationships with your parents, with your coworkers, within your community, and just to use that as a tool for self-reflection. Am I giving myself the experience that I want? And can I change that? Like a lot of the practices that we do intentionally and unintentionally bring up old, uncomfortable memories for people. Like meeting 150 people is a lot of ways like going back to high school and being a freshman.
Sure.
And so you have this opportunity to re-experience that difficult emotion or that altered state and say, okay, but now I'm a grown-up. Now I'm in power. What could I do to make this outcome differently? Who do I want to be? How do I want this to turn out? What's my strategy? Because I'm no longer new at this. And I have this opportunity in this moment, not just to have a different experience, but also in many ways to rewrite my experience of all of those going forward and to feel empowered and to say, yeah, high school was scary, but it's not a big deal anymore. And to actually have that fear leave our body slowly, but also permanently. So that's what I'm interested in. And that's what I try to cultivate by connecting people. There's a lot of other, not busy work, it's important work that I do, but that I would say if I had a mission or a vision for what I do, and that it's that.
I know you've had this ultimate vision because I've seen you navigate through so many things since you started exploring this particular thing. It didn't even start, obviously, where you are now. Where did it start? Well, one, your fascination for what you do in general.
I mean, I think there's a lot of nature versus nurture here. Believe it or not, I was a very quiet, sort of introspective, introverted child. And I was definitely one of the kids who was observing social interactions always. I mean, there was a huge binge of like probably 2 or 3 decades of intense codependency thrown in there, but really aware of my impact on other people. The codependency piece was believing that because I could influence somebody, I was therefore responsible for them. And then also my dad is a therapist. My grandma was a therapist. My uncle is a therapist. My grandfather was a therapist. And my grandmother, on my mother's side especially, she was really interested in Carl Jung. She gave me a book in high school about like quantum physics and consciousness called the quantum self. So there's always been these little inklings of this. And it's also spirituality has always been fascinating to me because I think that aside from other people, our relationship with, I can now say the word God without cringing, but really feeling connected. Yeah, but really feeling connected to ourselves and feeling connected to nature and feeling connected to the world. Those two things are the most likely to influence our state, in my opinion.
How did obviously I know so much about your past and we only have so much time on this, but obviously a lot of this podcast has to do with the past. So what are some of those things that you did experience and how those things affected you and how, I guess, how those things that you experienced in the past brought you to where you are and what you do today?
Yeah, sure.
That way you can highlight some.
Yeah, I will say.
You grew up in the East Coast.
I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in an intellectual college town.
And you're very intellectual.
We read books for fun. And I used to make fun of the West Coast and I was like, they're not readers. They're not that smart. And then I moved to LA and I was like, I don't want to read books. It's beautiful outside. So I feel like reading and intellectualism is really awesome if the weather's terrible and you're stuck inside for like 6 to 8 months a year.
Which you are if you're from Massachusetts.
Yeah, if you're Massachusetts. And I think I'm actually going to skip over most of that other than to say I was really identified. I had a really strong identity and my understanding of the world was really limited in a way that I didn't know. I didn't know a lot of people that were doing something different other than the types of things that were in my town. So I lived in Amherst, Massachusetts, and if you were successful but not a jerk, you were a professor or you ran a nonprofit.
Makes sense.
And then I lived in Nantucket, and if you were successful, you were probably a carpenter or some weird type of rich person who's just a summer person who I don't understand at all. And I still remember moving from Nantucket to New York. And if I'd meet a guy in like nice clothes or with a nice car, I'd be like, are you in construction? Like it was just my framework. It was like immediately I was like, ooh, lots of money. Funny. Maybe you're a plumber. And there's like restaurant owners. There's all these different things.
Oh my gosh.
But again, I had traveled a fair amount, but my understanding or my frame for what's possible in the world was still really limited, I think. And influenced by my childhood. I specifically moved to Los Angeles where I met my ex-husband because I had a girlfriend who was living in Portland, Oregon, who had spent a lot of time in Thailand, and she moved back to the United States. And she blew my mind with this idea. And I said, why Portland, Oregon from Thailand, which seems so luxurious? And she said, well, Claire, I love it here. She listed a lot of things that she really liked. And she said, your relationships change. Your work's going to change, but if you like where you live, you've got a really good chance at always finding a way to be happy. And
I like that.
Yeah, after my 30th winter, taking Prozac, quitting my job and dumping my boyfriend every November, I thought maybe
it's too cloudy there.
maybe I don't have to work so hard to accommodate the environment, and maybe I should just be someplace that's nicer to me. And that was great. And I haven't gone back since. So moving to Los Angeles was a big deal for me simply because I had no idea how much of my mood was affected by the weather. And then I think getting, at least for me, the major catalysts to get to the place I am now was, I don't know how else to say it, but a willingness to die to my old self. I was so unhappy. I was a horrible wife, but I was so resentful and angry all the time, and I didn't know how to express my emotions. And it was not one-sided. I wasn't the only terrible person. I think it was really hard for both me and my ex-husband. But I had gone from feeling bubbly and bright and into the arts to just unhappy and prickly all the time. The smallest little thing would make me rage with anger or feel so upset, and I would go to bed really early. And thank God my ex-husband was brave enough to ask for a divorce. And I was so angry at him at that point because, I felt like I had your baby. I left Los Angeles to move to Phoenix, where it's your family, your career. I had just, for like the third time, rebuilt a mom's group friends.
You are extraordinary at building. And this is what you do for your job, building communities.
We had this, young child.
I am so actually. We share a mutual friend, Libby, because actually it is also because of your ex-husband, and we're all also friends.
Yeah.
By the way, so Claire is very good friends with her ex-husband. I'm very good friends with my ex-husband. They are friends. We are all friends. In fact. It's
remarkable.
It is remarkable. We have trick-or-treated together, all of us, with them having girlfriends and us in relationships, trick-or-treating down the street all together with our daughters. And it is beautiful.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is also truly because of the work that you've done now. And I know this because I've been your friend along the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is all to say, December of that year, or October or November, was also the first year they were running this program called Fit for Service. And
how did you find out about it?
I listened to a podcast of Tim Ferriss, and the gentleman who's sort of the lead of the program, Aubrey Marcus, was on it. It's actually funny because Aubrey, who I now adore,
yes, I've heard you talk about her.
Yeah, it's a boy.
Oh, a boy.
It's okay. He
didn't even
all the
see.
time.
There we go.
There you go. But I was listening to the podcast, and at the time he was like in a polyamorous relationship, and he had a fitness company with Joe Rogan.
I remember this.
And I was like, I don't know about this, bro, but there's something about it where if I'm drawn to it, I think other people will be too. And simultaneously, I was just sick of myself. And I realized that it wasn't going to get me anywhere being mad at my ex-husband for being who he was. It wasn't going to get me anywhere to be mad at the world for being the way it was. I made every single choice that made me unhappy. I chose him. I chose my work. I chose to have a baby. Everything was my choice. And I really wanted to choose differently, but I didn't know how because I didn't understand other ways of being, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
And then, so that was a huge catalyst for me. And I thought that by joining a community that was larger than myself, that was full of people doing all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, like people sell underwear on their internet and make millions of dollars a year. I can figure something out that's a little bit more
really
palatable.
Good perspective.
Right? I can figure out something
that's... You can sell underwear on the internet and make a living. Yeah. I'm sure we can all figure something out.
We can figure something out that's not terrible. And that was also... working with you, I was so grateful to have that stopgap. And it was really fun because when I was doing your personal assisting, it was like, go find pretty presents and cook food. And so I would have the best time, and it was creative, and I felt really competent. And then working in marketing it was creative at first. And then I realized, again, there's a lot of repetitive tasks. No matter, there's only so creative you can be. The clients want this sheet of paper and they want 50 of them. And even if only 2 of them get used, you still have to produce it every single time. And that was kind of soul-sucking. And I had this, again, this realization, I don't know what I'm doing, but if I feel sad and sick and tired all the time, and if I spend 8 hours a day in that space, I will not have the energy to figure anything else out. So it was this sort of perfect storm.
Well, it affects your energy in everything.
Yeah.
Your energy with our children, in relationships, with our friendships. It's just like it's a depleting thing when you're in that space.
And at least at that point, I think that was September of 2019. I had been this cohort for 9 months. And I knew enough people doing different types of things that I said, okay, there is something out there that I can try, and I am committed to trying it. And I actually didn't get another job for 6 months. And thankfully I had some side income. Otherwise, I mean, I can understand why people don't make that shift. It's terrifying. And then I didn't have a full-time job for almost a year. But July of that year, I enrolled in a course called the Alt MBA with Seth Godin, who's a wonderful writer. And during that time period, I realized, okay, I've got like 5 months before I'm in really big trouble financially. What can I do? And so I just said, well, what makes me money? What do I enjoy? And what of those things, if I play with those things, if I try like a coaching business, or if I try doing events, or I try working with other people to help them in some way, which one gets the most energetic response? Either where I feel the most alive doing it, or people are like, yes, please take my money. And then I had my financial goals, and I just said, I am going to figure this out. And I have all of these different ways to make it happen. I'm going to figure it out by the end of the year. And then literally a month or two later, the company now that I work with was like, please come help us. And it wasn't that I was angling for a job. I just was doing what I do, which was making things easier, making things run more smoothly, communicating better, that type of thing. So I couldn't have guessed that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think many people around me were not surprised at all, but it worked out faster than I anticipated. So I think those were the two big catalysts for me, is completely taking responsibility for all of my choices, which was really terrible because I thought, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. And then also I said, well, this is one of my favorite things. If I can make this big of a disaster, I must be an incredible creator. So what can I make if I'm actually conscious of my choices and I'm being thoughtful and aware? And I made something pretty good.
You've made something pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, let's segue into, I think, well, what do you enjoy most about what you, or explains, I guess, some of these events that you put on?
Yeah.
I know that usually whenever you're doing one of these, you're gone for multiple days on end. Sometimes you're in amazing, incredible costumes, and you come back. You're usually exhausted, but also so vibrant.
Yeah.
When you return.
There's no secret sauce to what we do other than, I'm just trying to think of how it's a tricky thing to explain. These events are, like a series of working with really incredible coaches from around the world, coaches and leaders. We also bring in musicians. So there's a period where you, like, if music is a medicinal experience, that music can change your state. So I get to see these quote unquote like top performers, people who have been on podcasts, people that run really successful businesses about self-development or dating, or there's a whole wide range of these things, or even just people who are incredibly successful in their career, but they're successful because of their self-awareness and like being really conscious of their decisions and strategic. So we bring people together. We ask them to do things that are together that are intentionally challenging.
Sometimes they're uncomfortable, right?
Uncomfortable, yeah. So there's
like, for example.
So for example, we asked, I'll give you a contrast.
Yeah.
One of the challenges is we ask people to do this type of Spartan race. And the idea is, to push against your desire and to know that you are stronger than you think you are. So we asked them to just run a mile. It's pretty hot out, with water in their mouth. And so the idea is, can you run a mile and not drink the water? Can you make it all the way to the end? And it's also disgusting because about 1 minute into having water in your mouth, it turns into this like warm thing. And so that's not anything that's going to challenge you. You're not under physical risk. We don't ask people to be in sweat lodges for hours. We have done Temescal, which is a type of sweat lodge. But again, we're careful. We're not pushing people anywhere close to anything that's in danger. We're not doing hot coal walks. But it's really sort of push your mental edge. And that is really challenging for some people. For other people, the far more challenging thing is an ecstatic dance, where you're asked to really dance fully to a series of songs that usually have like a story arc or a purpose of saying, like, using this music, can I tap into this emotion and feel this thing in this moment? And how does my body want to express? Not just like, anger doesn't just mean I'm going to be crying and yelling, but like, can you actually like move anger somatically through it so that it actually passes through and is no longer like a stuck emotion? And the number of grown adults where the biggest challenge for them is dancing in front of somebody else is high. And again, it's like, it's this idea of like, I want to be free, and my disdain or discomfort is not allowing me to be too. I'm going to sneeze. How do you sneeze on a podcast?
I don't.
This microphone.
Just turn away from the mic.
Sorry, gang.
Sneeze. Allergies.
Yeah. So both of those discomforts, most everybody is happy-go-lucky in comfort. And it's not until you are pushed either because of the way your relationship is going, because of the way your job is going, because of your finances. It's in those crunch times where we default back to an old pattern and we screw everything up. It's like, it is go time. It is like the crux, and we wither and we turn back into our childlike self and make things worse. Or we're unwilling to face hard things. Like, I really struggle doing paperwork and taxes, and that's still something that brings up a nonsensical, like visceral fear. Like, I would rather like touch a lot of creepy snakes. Like, I would have like my nervous system would be more regulated, and it's because I have a lot of stories about my worth, my capacity, and my capability. All of these things come up, and so if I'm unwilling to face them, then I'm going to be avoiding those experiences for the rest of my life. I'm not actually free. There's probably many experiences of dealing with a lot of money and finance that I would enjoy if I wasn't so scared of it. And the same thing goes for social scenarios. Like, if you're unwilling to be viewed as a little bit silly, or if you're unwilling to admit that you don't know what you're doing, like if you don't feel safe in the world unless you're an expert or really good at something, even like singing is really triggering for other people. Singing is I don't mean to sound like a hippie. It's very healing to move our voice.
Yes.
And it's something that all people have always done. We've like tribes for all time have sang together. It's really only recently that people are like, oh, I'm not a singer. And that we've thought that singing is only for special people who are like on television.
This is so funny that you bring that up. I think that all the time because my mom, when I was younger, just told me I had such a terrible voice and I was a terrible singer. So I literally am afraid to sing in front of people. It's ridiculous.
And it feels
so good
to
it does
sing.
feel so good. Now I roll my windows down, sunroof open. It's the best. When I feel the freest is when I'm just singing at the top of my lungs to the silliest song. It feels so good.
It feels so good. So we're
but
cutting
I'm like,
ourselves
oh, my voice
off.
is not good.
Yeah, we're cutting it. Like, there are so many sources of joy and expression that feel really good that we cut ourselves off from. And so then we end up living these small, I don't mean this in a rude way, but sort of emotionally small lives. Like, we don't allow ourselves to really experience the full joy and the full freedom that's available to us because we're scared of looking stupid.
So the purpose of a lot of this and these events in this community is really to put people sort of to challenge them on the edge of things that cause discomfort so they are in turn more comfortable with themselves after
exactly
leaving.
So there's like it's
like, oh, this is not a big deal actually to sing in front of people. I can do this and I can be comfortable and I can go home and I can also be comfortable having discomfort in different conversations with whatever relationship it may be, professional, personal.
And that's a lot of it too. And that's why the community piece is important, because there's also so many people that, like, this is a supportive container. So if you were told by your mother that you were a terrible singer, this is your chance to sing. And instead of having somebody tell you, ew, you have everybody around you singing with you, cheering you on, really being there for you, and being that peace where instead of being met with shame, you're met with acceptance.
And you can be set free.
And you can be set free.
To do all the things.
Which leads to personal acceptance.
Yes.
And that personal acceptance leads to not needing other people to accept you.
Not needing other people's approval.
Yeah. So it's really like identifying and owning your own bullshit. Sorry, swears.
We can swear on this.
Okay.
I've said the F word.
Yes.
Now I say F word.
My daughter's favorite part of the podcast, I'm sure.
That would be Kennedy's favorite part of the podcast.
So that's the idea,
as well.
is that you get to push your edges and then also be met with love.
What are some of you actually attended this originally. Mm-hmm. And so what are some of the let's say the top 2 tools and takeaways, like from the very beginning that you remember that you still use now?
There are so many. I think what I really didn't understand was the role that my physical body plays in my emotional experience, and also sort of the role, how much I can trust my body to tell me things. So a lot of the activities that were helpful for me was breath work, which can be really intense for some people. It's wonderful. Ice cold exposure. I did 30 days of ice baths, and I've
done this with you, and it's so
it's a
invigorating.
remarkable reset. And really thinking about my emotional piece as not just through my mind, but through my body. Can I have an emotional experience dancing? Like if I'm really, so Vailana, Aubrey's wife, she does a practice, I believe it starts with Mama Gina, called swamping. And it's this full-fledged expression of a difficult emotion. It's really not just saying this intellectual, you know what, like, I don't really like the way you did that. And these are the 6 things that I want to be done. You know, vocal expression or sort of sharing our thoughts can be helpful. But if you really want to move an emotion, listening to an angry song and stamping around and dancing like a banshee can actually move it through your body. So I have another friend who I believe you either know or friends with, named Stephen Jaggers. He owns a company called Somatic Breathwork. And I recently saw a clip of him, and he says, you know, the reason that talking alone doesn't work, or talk therapy is not long-term effective by itself, is because it doesn't address the body. If you're in a fearful state, it is very hard to make good decisions. If you're in an anxious state, if you feel like you're being attacked, if you are angry, we don't have access to the part of our brain that helps us make good decisions. And so talking it through without addressing our nervous system response, the cortisol that's running through us, the adrenaline, and finding ways also to find peace with our nervous system in a really biological way, is only looking at half of the picture.
I love the way you explain these things. And there's been a couple times in the past where many times in the past where we've talked about, there's this book that The Body Keeps the Score, which I don't think either of us have actually made it through because we have a strong understanding of this. But you are always one to remind me, and I think this is very important, when things have happened, traumatic triggers, that usually the thing that is happening, or what's caused this visceral feeling and this pit in your stomach, inability to eat, sleep, things, it's from something that really has nothing to do with what's actually going on in your body. And you've been such a strong support to me through that, and reminding me, it's the way you explain it. It's so logical. One particular time, without going into the story, I mean, I was a mess for days over this silly thing, but it was some sort of traumatic trigger from a past experience. And you had said to me, Amanda, your body is going to need a few days to catch up to your mind to be able to process this. So as the days go by, it's going to get easier on your body. Your body needs to actually physically release it. Let it take the time. Yeah. It's going to be
Those
uncomfortable.
Do not
but
go
just
away right
let
away.
it take the time. It will. And it's going to pass, and it's going to get easier. And just most recently, when I had released the podcast and met you at a birthday party and cried uncontrollably for hours, which you know me and I rarely cry, but you've seen me cry a few times. And you had sent me something from TikTok after I had talked to you many times about what was going on. And you really helped me through that, because your ability to be able to logically name things, so that way you can actually process the feeling behind it and feel comfortable with that, is so incredibly helpful. And I know it's from all of this work that you've done, but it's extraordinary, your ability to be able to, I always say it with such clarity.
Yeah.
It's your name. But you sent me something, and it was off of TikTok, and it was saying that your emotional response right now is because your body is remembering that trauma as soon as it realizes it's no longer in a traumatic state. It's remembering this, and this feeling that you're having is making you have this visceral reaction. But as soon as it realizes it's not in trauma anymore, and that you are in fact actually safe and in control of your mind, body, and your space, you will have this feeling of like peace and lightness and freedom. And that is exactly what happened. Actually, it was happening when you sent me that. It was such your ability to be able to see people and communicate that to help them through those situations really is extraordinary. You really have a tremendous talent. I have to say.
I love you.
I love you more. I love you more.
I think, there's varying different versions, I think, of my dad. As a therapist would say, the worst part about feeling bad is that people feel bad about feeling bad. Eric Godsey, a coach I work with, we were just looking through quotes for some of our media. He said, the last gasp of shame to take control of you will be to shame you for your shame. And I think all of these things are true. So, when I'm speaking to somebody in an emotional experience or to myself, I think it's so important to normalize these reactions and to not say that it's acceptable to be in a triggered state all the time, but to say it's understandable and it's something that requires time. So like
I love that.
You, again, also, it's almost like a cascade. Like I wouldn't expect you to take 6 shots of tequila and then say, well, I have clarity and so I'm sober now. Like your body takes time. These are actual physical reactions to a trauma response. They're like cortisol is a drug that your body makes that affects your body. And the only way for that to go away is to let it slowly settle down. There's not like an injection that like takes away your cortisol right away.
We wish there was.
We sure do wish there was. So sitting it out is part of the process. And also a lot of these triggers or these responses are what we're trying to do is bring them to the surface so we're conscious of them. And even if we're conscious of like, hey, this is really triggering for me, it's still going to be triggering. So can we create a space? Can we create a little bit of space between feeling the trigger and responding and reacting to it? And so our goal isn't to like understand it and to get better right away. It's to retrain our nervous system away, almost like, like somebody who's in combat who has somebody tap on the shoulder and their gut reaction is to go like this. So just make it so that first you pause, or try not to punch someone in the face. Can you get from that experience where someone touches you on the back and you want to punch them because you're in defense mode to just gripping your fist? And then from gripping your fist, can you keep your hand and clench it on the counter? But it's creating spaciousness so that you have more freedom and control over what your response is. But it takes practice. It took a lot of practice to get to that way. Your body is in a groove. I can't remember what it's called. It's not a reaction, but it's like, what's it called when the doctor hits you on your knee? It's like that automatic.
Oh, I know yes, I know.
So that word's going to bother me forever. It's that automatic. And so what we try to do is just create space between the trigger and the thing. And I will also say, I think one of my favorite understandings of like triggers and being in trauma is being triggered is involuntary time travel. And that's the idea of when this person shows up and acts like your mom, even if they are not like your mom and it's just this turn of phrase, but you get their reaction, you're not present with them. You're going back to Amanda, who lived through 6 different scenarios, looked exactly like that, and they all turned out bad. And she is like, absolutely not. This is terrible. So you're not actually here. You are back in the past. And so one of the techniques that I've seen used that I use for myself also is when I'm feeling really upset about something that's very present or that feels present, but my reaction feels quote unquote overboard. I actually sit in that feeling and I try to remember like the first time that I ever felt that feeling. And it might not be the first time, but like when is the first memory I have of that experience? Because in that experience, there's a core story or a belief that has led me to experience that experience over and over and over again. Someone's out to get me. The world's not safe. I'm not good enough. I will be abandoned. And so that story permeates all of our interactions. And we begin. One of the most wonderful things about our brain is that it is a pattern-making machine. And one of the worst things about our brain is that it is a pattern-making machine. And so if our brain has decided that the world is not safe, it will always be looking for evidence of that to be true. And so you have to rewire that pattern to feel safe. And it's not that you're bad. It's just that's what your brain does. Like your lungs breathe, your brain makes patterns.
Always so much logic. And clarity.
It's very straightforward. The whole idea is don't feel bad about feeling bad. Like, this is your brain's job. It's doing a great job. Thank you, brain.
It's doing
but
what
that's
it's supposed
not
to do.
actually what I wanted. Let me work with you on this so that we can get better. You know, he's not trying to be mad. He's like, your brain's not trying to fuck up your life, but it does because it's a good little pat. He's like, aren't you so proud of me? I made a pattern. Like, no, this sucks.
Oh my goodness. This is so very, very helpful, super insightful. I love the way that you explain things. And we are actually going to go into another episode after this to dive into some of these things more. But I wanted everybody to have a background on this episode. So there will be a part 2 to this one. But first, before we end it, how do we find you?
I think
she's like, I don't know if I want you to find me.
No, you can find me. So I have an Instagram, which is at Claire E. Spencer. So that's Claire spelled the French way, Claire, 2 E's, Spencer, Spencer. The other way to remember it is it's 2 mall stores, Claire's and Spencer's, just an E in the middle. So I'm on Instagram there. I write a newsletter for Fit for Service every other week for the community. So you could go to Fit for Service Instagram and there's a sign up link. If you're interested in reading my writing, that's there. And
you're an exceptional writer.
Thank you. I think clairespencer.com is still under my domain, but like I said, paperwork's not my forte. So
she's a creative. Paperwork is always going to be secondary.
I'm rewriting that story. If there's lots of things that I can write right now, it's not my priority. It's not your
priority. Well, thank you for coming on, Claire. And stay tuned for part 2. That is, You're It, Girl.
Thanks, Amanda.